Welcome back to another episode of the HIT podcast. My name is James Leighton, CEO and founder of Andersen James. This is the podcast where I bring you real life stories from some of the most interesting leaders of our sector, and we discuss some of the biggest challenges facing the sector today. Today, I was delighted to be joined by Dave Sheridan, Executive Chairman of Ilke Homes and Chairman of MJ Evans. Dave discusses at length his journey through leadership, where he was responsible for one of the biggest trade sales of our history within the sector. We also discuss Ilke Zero, their new carbon neutral home that they plan to launch in the near future. And we talk about some of the biggest challenges that are facing the sector from a land and planning perspective. I hope you enjoy the show and get real value from it. And if you do, I'd ask that you like and subscribe and share with your network. Dave, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, James. How are you doing?
Very well, very well. Just for the purpose of the listeners, Dave, just give us an overview of yourself. Obviously, I've done one in the pre-show notes, but give us an overview of yourself.
I'm Dave Sheridan, 58 years old. Started life as a quantity surveyor back in Teesside, working for Wimpy, as it happens, building houses in Darlington. Then progressed through various contractors and subcontractors before I finished up sort of leading Kia's bid to do the Sheffield outsourcing back in 2002, which is my first foray into exec leadership. We had a very successful partnership with Kia, great 8 years with Kia. Then I moved on to Apollo, where I was Chief Operating Officer, but made Chief Executive within a very short period of time. That's really when the fun journey began, when we merged with Keepmoat. Keepmoat actually bought us for £1. It was quite a complex deal. And I stepped up to be Chief Executive of Keepmoat in 2012, which is probably where most people in the industry know me from.
Yeah.
Spent a very successful 5-6 years at Keepmoat before we went through 2 corporate transactions, being sold by the bank and then being sold by TDR. I moved on to NG, leaving Keepmoat Homes behind, which we can touch on as we go through the chat. I then chose to leave NG in 2018. And since then, I've been exec chair of Ilke and doing a non-exec with a groundworker in the Midlands called MJ Evans. So people know my leadership style's quite open, quite chatty, quite relaxed. So hopefully we'll have a good chat about it, James, and you'll get some juicy stuff for your listeners.
Let's hope so. And just talk me through that journey, because I got to know you at Apollo, so that feels like a long time ago for me. But what was the transition like? Because clearly Apollo was quite a small family feel. You had a great culture there, and I think you managed to transfer that through when it went to Keepmoat, etc., through the acquisitions. But how did you manage to sort of keep the culture the way it was through, what was relatively a small business in Apollo, right through to what was Keepmoat at the end, £1 billion business nearly?
Yeah, but Keepmoat was a 4 or 5 businesses. So you had Milner Build, you had FHM, you had Keepmoat Homes, you had Bramall Construction, and each had their own personalities, their own identity, and they had a lot of good young talent that just wanted to be let off the leash a little bit. So what we did, and when I say we, James Thompson joined about the same time, and James is now Chief Executive Gleeson. He was CFO while I was CEO. And we took a view that the clients really appreciated that family style delivery. And if you remember, most of the work is done in people's homes or creating people's homes.
Yep.
So if you've got people who care about what they do, then the product's going to be so much better and the client's going to get such a better service. So we always took the view, if people enjoyed coming to work, then the client would get a better job and we'd get more work and the business would be successful. So, yep. And we always try to translate it as, well, how would I want people to treat me? So you want people to be straight, you want people to be honest, but you also want people to live the life. So it's striking that balance between, challenging targets, but also rewarding them people when they achieve them targets. So yeah. It was a little bit about investing in them as people. It was a little about having the right reward structure, but it also was a little bit about recognizing that there was talent there that just needed development in the first place. So it was a really strong, exciting time. And if you think both Apollo and Keepmoat had gone through some pretty big transitions from owner-occupiers. So you had Terry Bramall and Dick Watson, who were the leaders of Keepmoat. Yeah. And then you had sort of Rob and sort of Gary who led Apollo. So they had very strong individual cultures anyway. So it was just about taking the best, but trying to create that one brand, that one keep mode that people could, you know, as a flag people could rally behind, and we could tell a good story. So and we were straight with people. I think if you're straight with people, you get the best out of people. So that's always been, you know, my mantra is, you know, if you tell people the truth, you tend to get it back in spades. That's the top and bottom of it.
Yeah, and I've seen that a lot with you over the years, but where did your inspiration come from? I mean, like, was it always the dream to become a chief exec of a big national business, or I suppose who did you look up to coming up through the ranks of the businesses you work for?
Not at all. I mean, I was just a happy-go-lucky lad from Middlesbrough. I mean, I grew up on an estate which is about 3 miles outside the centre. Went to comprehensive school. Was just a normal kid who played football for the school team. You know, enjoyed growing up with my mates and, you know, discovering, you know, the first pub, the first pint, the normal journey, and it was quite strange. But my dad died when I was 16, and I always said I would take every opportunity that came in front of me because life's for living. You know, you never know what's around the corner. And when I joined Wimpy's, there was a regional quantity surveyor called Mike Griffin who was probably my age that I am now, but he obviously saw something in me, and he encouraged me, and he encouraged me the best I could be. And I think that's when I sort of changed from being, you know, one of the lads into thinking, well, there's something else in this life. There's something else you can go for. And I've always, you know, I talk about this to quite a lot of people. You know, there's people who look at job descriptions and think I can only do 9 out of the 10, you know, factors on that job description. Therefore, I won't apply for it. If I can do 3, I think I've got half a chance. So I've always thought that, you know, push yourself and challenge yourself to your limits, and, you know, you're gonna achieve. So, but I never started out with the ambition of being a CEO. I just wanted to be the best quantity surveyor I could be. Then I wanted to be the best senior quantity surveyor I could be.
Yeah.
You know, then probably a big turning point is when I got divorced in the mid-90s, and I moved to London, and I just saw there was a whole new world out there, and it was, you know, having the right attitude to work and the right sort of approach to taking risk, you could succeed far more in the south than you could in the north.
Yeah, for sure. And one thing I think Keepmort did well and Apollo was they started that base foundation of knowledge with most of their leaders as a QS or financial backgrounds. And I think that's a really, really good thing that people could learn from today, is that a lot of the trainees that I see coming through now have these rotational schemes. And actually that gives a good grounded leader, where I think that's where Keepmort got it really right back in the day.
I think it was more than that as well. They had fantastic loyalty. So if you think of, you know, the people who are still there now, so if you think of Martin Smithurst, if you think of Dan German and others, you know, they were trainee quantity surveyors who joined at, you know, early 20s, and they've been there now 25, 26 years. So they've grown up with the business and they understand the business. And I think by growing your own talent, and I think a lot of organisations should look at this, you know, and it's a bit like football teams, isn't it? If you get the talent coming through the academy,
yep,
you've got a much more in-depth sort of, and you've got a much more people who know your DNA, and you talk about culture. These are people who grew up with that culture, so they want to bring that culture forward as well. So we had fertile talent to work with, and, you know, don't underestimate that. And I always say to any organisation, you know, growing your own is much more rewarding than, forgive me, James, but you're paying a recruiter a massive fee to bring talent in. So.
Yeah. I mean, you're so right. And we do a lot of work now with businesses around trainee and graduate schemes and apprentices even. You know, apprentices dipped off for the last 5 or 6 years, and it's back now. And I think people are really putting an emphasis on growing their own talent, because you've seen yourself, you know, QSs in the marketplace, non-existent. You know, there's very few out there, and it's because the uptake at university has gone down dramatically over the years, I think.
The quantity surveyor is it lost its way a bit as well. So, you know, we were taught the basics. You know, we were taught the basics to go to site. We were taught the basics to measure it. If you can't measure it, you know, you can't value it. And we were taught the basics about understanding cost and value. And I think too many graduates, not now, because I think we've turned the corner, but in the not too distant past, quantity surveyors were demanding a premium, coming out demanding cars and laptops and all the frills. And they were jumping too far ahead without learning the basics. So I think growing your own gets them grounded in the basics and teaches them good habits. And good habits, you know, they become habits for a lifetime, not just for when you're training. So,
and what about the Because the one thing that we're noticing a lot now is that QSs or trainees are becoming assistants, then QSs, then senior QSs in a lot shorter time period than they were, maybe 20 years ago. Do you think we've got a responsibility to make the journey of development slower for our juniors coming through, because they become senior directors within 10 years now and actually probably don't have the fundamental knowledge they need to lead a business at that stage?
And I mean, it's a double-edged sword. You don't want to kill aspiration, but also you need to teach people how to do the job. So yes, there's an element of people being fast-tracked, and yes, it's part of society and everyone's everything now. Everything's instant with the internet and the smartphones and McDonald's. You can pull up, drive up, and drive away in 2 minutes, and you've got a main meal. So everything's instant. The challenge is that if you're going to succeed for the long term and have a great career, I think the individuals as well as the businesses need to strike a balance between aspiration and development.
Yeah.
And I think having a good, well-designed training plan or career path, that's great. I mean, I remember when I was sort of the first 6 years I thought I could run every site going, but it's only when you do it that you don't know it. So it's
yeah, of course.
And also it's changed. When I started out, we had direct trades and everybody was employed on the books. So at Wimpy's, when I was measuring my first job, I had 72 bricklayers on, that was my first job, measuring the bricklaying.
Yeah.
You learn a lot more from measuring 72 bricklayers than you do from reading a drawing and reading a contract. Whereas now everything's packaged off into little sub-trades. So if you're a bricklaying quantity, bricklaying, but you don't necessarily know mechanical and ventilating. We had the beauty of having all trades, so we learned it all.
Yeah.
So I do think there's a slightly different approach required to make sure people get the breadth of experience as well as the specialisms.
Yeah, absolutely. And what did you learn in that period? That was like a big chunk of your career. What were the big learnings that you had through that journey, through leadership? So from being a QS right up to being a chief exec, what were the big learns that you had over that period, would you say?
I think my biggest learning as starting out my career was how to speak to people. And I think one of the qualities that have been commented on about myself is my ability to speak to the shop floor as well as to the boardroom.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's not by accident. You learn that. I learned that by working on a people talk about offices and desks. I mean, we were hot desking back in 1979 because we went to a cabin. There was a cabin for 7 staff, which was engineers, quantity surveyors, site managers, and it was, if you found a bit of wood to do your work on, and there was you found a bit of wood to do your work on. So you learn how to engage with people. You learn, and again, that's where you learn to get the best out of people. So I was doing cost and bonus when I started. So talking to somebody about the wages. So I remember I'm a 17-year-old snotty-nosed kid who's, going to college 1 day a week, trying to tell some 74-year-old ground worker that I'm not paying his bonus because I don't agree with his measure. You do learn life skills in them situations.
I bet.
Particularly when they don't agree with you. So, and so you learn them skills. And as you progress through, hopefully you bring all that learning with you as you go through your career. And what was quite interesting as I go through the corporate ladder is, you're there because of what you do and what you know. You're not necessarily there because, people like you. So you've got to learn that you've got value to add at the table. And it's about listening and learning and contributing. So it's about being humble enough to be at the table and appreciate you don't know everything, but being confident enough to know that you've got value to add. Otherwise, they wouldn't have put you in that position.
Yeah, absolutely.
So as you go through that journey, having the life skills, as I say, you learn on a building site in the middle of Darlington, and then you learn in the head office in Cargafleet Lane, and then you learn in the office at Key as you go to Tempford Hall, all with their own little microeconomic suggestions and their own little structures. It's about taking away and making sure that you contribute. So as long as you're adding value and you feel you're adding value, I do believe you will continue to progress and you'll continue to learn. And that's the other thing. You continue to learn. Keep your mind open.
Yeah, it's a massive, massive strength, isn't it? Just being able to see what's going on around you and read the room. And as we transition to the present day, or 2.5 years ago, should we say, you took the role as executive chairman at Ilke. Talk me through sort of what's happened over the last 2.5 years. So what did you inherit, and give us a helicopter view of what Ilke looks like today, I suppose?
Ilke, it's still in that sort of, if you go Storm and Form and sort of curve. So at the time, it was forming, and we inherited a fantastic idea. We inherited a great investor in TDR who were supporting the business and hoping to grow the business into a valuable asset going forward. We inherited a lot of talent, but different talent come from, so you got manufacturing, you got construction, you got logistics. And it was a bit like an orchestra without a tune. So my role was to sort of try and bring it together and get them to play the tune on the instruments that they had. And I was part successful in that, but partly we needed to bring more talent in. So Giles came across from TD as an operating partner, very experienced in startup and very experienced in manufacturing. I had the development heritage. We brought in Mark Chilvers from a manufacturer who built the trains for Hitachi up at Durham. And then it was about shaping the business around, so you need the development arm, you need the sort of construction arm, you need the manufacturing arm, and then you need the sales engine as well. So it was about learning what worked, what didn't work. So my role as exec chair was making sure that we were being responsible to the investors, and not without its challenges. It meant we tried to bring the right talent in at the right space. And the other thing was holding it back because, we've been going at a hell of a pace within Ilke, and sometimes gone a little bit too fast, which has meant we've probably brought stuff to market ahead of time. And we've learned from that. It's been expensive learning, but ultimately we've worked with the clients to make sure that what we deliver, is fit for purpose and a quality product. So as we sit here today, we've gone from building 2 houses in the corner of a shed in Bridlington when I first got involved in 2017. Last year, we produced just north of 200 plus houses. This year, we'll produce circa 700 houses with a pipeline of over 3,000. So we've gone from being, I would say, a cottage industry in the corner of a shed and, sharing part of Elliot's business to now being a major player, so the second, third largest employer in Harrogate with a fantastic, story to tell.
Yeah.
So, and what frustrates is, if I was a car manufacturing plant establishing myself, people wouldn't pay any attention to the investment and where we were going. Because we work in a housing space, there's a lot of commentators out there commenting on the losses of the business or the cash of the business. This is quite normal in a manufacturing business, but it's totally alien to the housing world. And so we spend a lot of time defending ourselves when we should be really proud of what we've achieved. So
100%. And I've been to the factory and it's evolved in the 2 visits I've been, but there's some real scope to that factory, isn't there? I mean, what capacity can you get out of that factory? It's a huge facility, isn't it?
Oh, we can get the 2,000 homes out of that factory. And, when you speak to Mark, who's the manufacturing director, operations director, he'll talk about the potential of the business. So if you think we're still putting the brick slips on, like we put brick slips on for like we lay bricks for hundreds of years, if we can automate that, and if we can automate parts of the finishing, and if we can, if you think what construction still does, and it does very little different to when I started in 1979. We're now building factory, we're building walls for the houses on a factory basis. So they're coming as, stick metal. Yeah. And then a wall pops out in 17 minutes the other end, fully insulated, fully boarded both sides, ready for incorporating into the home. We can apply that manufacturing logic all the way through the line, and it's bringing the supply chain with us. So if you think we still wire houses the same way, pulling cable through, joists and up roof walls, the same way as when I started working in 1979, as I mentioned before, if we can get a wiring loom from the supply chain, which means, you can take hours out of the process, you can simplify the waste, you can bring a much, much, much better product forward. And if you think of the industrial strategy of the UK, industrialization, more efficiency, more productivity, less waste, creating jobs in the north, for delivering houses in the south, so rebalancing agenda. It ticks a hell of a lot of boxes, and we need to do it because the trades aren't there. The trades genuinely aren't there for the homes we need in the country.
Yeah, you've only got to look at bricklaying gangs at the moment, have you? No one can find bricklayers. It's impossible to keep going the same way. And I think the benefit I see of modular, and I'm not new to this, as I know you're not, is that quality is much easier to demonstrate. We can probably, de-skill some of the trades, can't we, in terms of some of the roles that they're going to deliver in the factory?
Yeah, but I'd say it's reskilling, because it's much of a expertise to get the tolerances on an engineered product as some of the bricklaying, and I've seen enough bricklayers who've grown old with arthritis and stuff like that. And we can make it safer, we can make it easier, and we can create much more. Do you want to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning to drive to a building site in the middle of Catterick, which is one of my first jobs, or do you want to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and drive to a factory that's the same temperature, whether you go in the winter or whether you go in the summer? I know
it's a good point. Yeah, it's a good point. And what are the other benefits you're seeing? I mean, like for a starting point, how quickly can you produce a house? Because that's what's well documented. But if start to finish, from materials coming into the factory to being built, what's the quick?
Our record for producing a house is about 7 days. It's not averaging about 12 days at the moment, 13 days. It depends on the different processes and what we're going through and how much we've got on the line.
Yeah.
So you can produce the houses quickly, but you still got to do the groundworks on site and still some stitching up on site, and some of the processes still need to evolve. But we will get to the point where, so we're self-delivering our own homes on our, that was part of the strategy pivot to go for a land-led strategy, and I'll touch on that in a minute.
Yeah.
Where we're in control of the site and the groundworks, we will take 55% out of the time for 100 home development.
That's insane. And that'll only get better and quicker with the more that you produce, won't it, from the factory?
Yeah, well, and also as we improve process as well, and as we learn, and supply chain comes with us. So we're still using product that's available from the built industry now. As we develop the product and we get smarter about how we do things, and as we work with supply chain, so we simplify some of the wet trade into dry trades, as we simplify some of the way we put the units together, and whether it's us or any other modular manufacturers, we've all gone through the same growth curve and the same challenges, but we need the industries to succeed just for the homes this country needs. So, I'm a great supporter of making sure the modular industry develops, and I do work with other modular suppliers to make sure that the industry is getting fit for purpose, and we're developing as we go along.
Yeah, and on that point, I suppose, where do you see, and for anyone that doesn't know Ilke, a lot of your products go to local authorities, don't they, in terms of you sell to that marketplace? There's not as much open market, am I right in thinking that?
We're doing a fair bit of open market. So we've done some open market supplying Vistry, we've done some open market supplying Keepmoor. We will be supplying some open market through Bellway on one of the Homes England sites down in Milton Keynes.
Right.
And we're doing some work with Countryside, but I think Countryside will go to the rental product. But, we do see the product being multi-tenure. We've started off where the market was, and we deliberately went that market because we understood from Keepmoor.
Uh-huh.
But we do believe that, as the product develops, and if you think of a car analogy, the chassis, if you think the chassis for a Skoda is the same as the chassis for a Volkswagen, is the same as the chassis for an Audi, all at different price points, all at different attractiveness to different parts of the market.
Yeah,
we do see us addressing that market, and I like to think of us as using the car analogy again. We're going to be the fleet car salesman rather than the showrooms. There'll be other people who do the showrooms. We want to be the fleet. We want volume, but we want to produce a fantastic product that will serve all 10 years rather than focus on the affordable entry point, which is obviously where it's been taken because there's volume there.
Of course.
But we do have people with mortgages, and we do have people living in them, very, very happily living in them as well. So,
and what about the design elements? So do you own and manage the design of the product, or do you let clients get involved? Or if it is a local authority RP, do you let them get involved in some of the design elements of the house?
We're no different to major developers. So the actual core type of the house is designed, whether it be a 2-bed, a 3-bed, or a 2.5 story, or a 3-story.
Yeah.
But clients, and subject to local planning, they can have input into the roof finish. They can have input into the, the brick style finish, the type of window. Is it a grey window, a white window, a brown window? On Vistry, we supplied Juliet balconies, so we're creating some street scene. For Keepmoor, we've done spotlights in the kitchen rather than pendants. Yep. We now do spots as a standard just because we found it works better for the product. In terms of kitchen, we're no different than any other developers. You can choose your style of kitchen, tiling. You can choose the floor covering, you can choose the bathroom tile, so there's a fair degree of choice, both in aesthetic and internal living style. Is it open plan, closed plan? So we do variations on the internal layout. But the external, we're constrained by the size of the frame, and we're constrained by, the design. And what we don't want to be doing is doing 1,000 house types. We want to be, focusing on 3 or 4 chassis, which gives us, 80 house types. That's what the focus is on.
And is it still 2 meters for transit? Am I right in thinking that, or what's the?
It's 5 meter width with an escorted load, but not police escorted.
Fine.
So we're constrained by the width of the module and the height of the module, which is, that's because we do 3D volumetric.
Yeah.
But we can do, if we think of drive route, we're doing 3-story homes, 2.5-story homes, terraces, detached, semi-detached. So when we started off Ilke, we always took the view we had to be able to service the market, not only in a price point, but also what works on an estate. And the products we put in the first portfolio would have serviced 85% of Keep Motorhomes' sites. And we knew that. So yes, we've done, I would say, affordable entry-level product now, but we've also done, if you think the most valuable house was sold by Keep Motor in Kent for over £400,000. So put it in context.
It does. And how much of the house is built in the factory? Is there any of it done on site or not, or is it all just stitched up on site?
It varies. So it depends on the roof style. If we can build a roof module in the factory, so sometimes we build the roof on site. Depending on how the finishes go, occasionally we do the top coat of render on site to give a better finish. Each site has its own conditions, own criteria. We like to do as much as possible in the factory. The whole purpose of why we started Ilke was to create new entrants, additionality to the building supply chain.
Yeah.
We never started off with a view we would eat cake from the developer's table, because that way it's not what we were created for. We were created for additionality. And
I saw that Savills had predicted 20% of homes will be delivered by modular by 2030. Fair or not?
I like Savills, yeah. No, I think that's fair. I mean, if you think we're doing over 5% at the moment, 3 to 5%, depending on what you classify as modular.
Yeah.
But if you think, we've talked about bricklayers, if you apply Brexit, if you apply the aging population of the construction workforce, if you apply the fact that we're still not supplying enough new homes for the country, then, the growth is not, this company won't be limited by growth. It'll be limited by what we can achieve.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think, what is it to be classed as modular? 40% is it that it's got to be done in the factory? Is that right?
I'm not sure, James. It varies. I mean, there's 7 categories of MMC. If you read the guidance that comes out of Homes England, obviously we're category 1, which is 3D volumetric. But there's different categories. I mean, some people say they're doing MMC when they're putting a bathroom pod in. Others say they're doing MMC when they're putting a modular staircase.
It's always going to be different. But I will be honest, 3-4 years ago, I'd have said modular. I'm not sure it's a concept that's going to work. And now I'm a total convert. Some of the things that people talk about, and clearly, like you've said already previously, is the price of it. I mean, how far are we off versus traditional build now, would you say? And at what point does it beat that critical mass and become cheaper than traditional build?
I'd rather say more affordable than cheaper. Cheaper is a kind of cheaper you don't like. I mean, there's an inflection point. I mean, if you think of us at the moment, we're probably in the south, we're on par with trad. In the north, we can be as much as 20% out. So that's the sort of delta. When we get to 1,000 homes through the factory, which is probably run rate back end this calendar year, then we're into profit and cash neutral. Then with the cost saving projects that we've got in the business plan, within 2-3 years, we will be as competitive as trad build across the country.
Okay.
Now, if you think that's why we believe that the business plan just makes total sense, because 1, will be more economical. 2, we can deliver all parts of the country. 3, we can bring people into and train them up in the factory far quicker than training the trades. So we can produce the volume as well. That's what's so attractive about the business plan that we've got. And that'll include some more mechanization. That'll include some more, improvement in supply chain. So currently, you know, we buy steel in. It's about how we configure that steel and where we use it and design some out. But it's also around the supply chain moving with us. So currently, you still have to use quilt mat in a very traditional way.
Right.
Now there are some manufacturers trial and blown fibre into the voids, which is okay. But then you're going to get the fire test. You've got, you know, on the back of Grenfell, we've got to make sure that it's fit for purpose. So as the supply chain and our techniques evolve, then we will be vastly more competitive than trad.
Okay.
That's probably 3 years away, if I'm being honest.
And there's so many questions, but where do you see the challenges in the future? Because it's a two-pronged attack, isn't it, for you? It's how do you procure enough sites from a land perspective, and then how do you create enough volume in the factory? But how are you currently going around procuring land? Are you working with a lot of RPs? How do you go around that process?
No, we started off the business. If you think when we started off Ilke, it was still Keepmoor Regeneration, Keepmoor Homes. So we had the relationship with the regeneration teams, and we had the depth of knowledge in the homes business around development and how it worked. What we found is that most clients, from a traditional contracting basis, only want to do pilots of 10s and 12s.
Yeah.
Now the challenge with that is you don't get the scale, and every site is sub-economic because you have to put a site manager on, you have to do the groundworks.
Yeah, of course.
But we understood clients need to get confidence in the product. We understood clients need, and we needed to learn ourselves. We needed to develop the prototypes and develop the product. And in 2 years, we moved from doing 40 sites of between 10 and 12, delivering 400 units.
Yeah.
Our smallest site going into next year, where we've controlled the land, is 56 units. So now our average site size is going to be 100 units.
Yeah.
So we pivoted about 18 months ago onto a land-led strategy and recruited a team in from Crest Nicholson, who were coming out of Crest as part of that business's evolution. And they've secured now 12 to 14 sites of 100 plus units, which is where the 3,000 unit pipeline comes from.
Yeah.
And that enables us to improve our site processes. It enables us to plot our own product in a more economical way, you know, so you're looking at sort of crane positions, you're looking at delivery positions, logistics. So it becomes much more scientific than just, we need 22 beds and 33 beds. There's a lot of science goes into the plotting. Then what we do is we look for partners. So we're doing schemes for PRS. You may have sort of announced the Man Group deal. We've done another group, another deal with Gresham House. So we've got a lot of schemes coming through where, you know, we've got real scale coming through from the rental products, both with RPs, local authorities, and private rented sector.
Yeah.
So that's enabling us to get this consistency of volume through the factory. That's enabling us to do more development on how the line should be balanced to make the factory more economical. And what it's also enabling us to do is take on direct teams now for the site deliveries to become more efficient. And if you think like a Formula One pit crew, that's the mentality we're adopting, which is around when our unit goes to site, you know, it's like we change the tires in 15 seconds. That's the mentality we get into. So
yeah, and do you target particular parts of the country from a land perspective, or is it anywhere? Like, is it easier to put it in a condensed area in the southeast, or how are you attacking that from a strategy?
The land strategy is around where we can get the Ilke product to work in terms of competing with traditional on value, but where we can get the density to make it work from a product mix point of view. It's looking for a 60 unit plus site so we can get the scale to make the site work. But it's also, we work with our RP partners and PRS partners about where does land work for them. Yeah. So we're not just, you know, shooting in a goldfish bowl. We're looking, or shooting fish in a barrel. We're looking for specific strategic land that works for an exit client. Yeah. Because we're trying to avoid doing auto market. We will do auto market still where it suits, but we're trying to avoid that for our product because, you know, there's Keepmoor, Bellways, Vistries out there who are expert in that. What we want to do is supply product. And ultimately the land strategy is all about supplying product. But we see the market in three notches. We want to do supply only. So a bit like a washing machine supplier, white label it. So, you know, Hoover produced hundreds of washing machines, but they're all rebranded. We're quite happy to do that. So units only. We're quite happy to do strategic partnerships like the deal with Places for People, where we will strike a deal where they've got land, they want to use our product and our expertise to help develop that. So we will work through that.
Yeah.
But also then we want to do the turnkey, which is where we find the land and bring the land through. And there's value in each. There's value in each of the 3 routes to market, and that's the view we're taking of the market.
And I think one thing I saw in the press this week is about Ilke Zero. Do you want to just tell us a little bit around that, if you can?
Yeah, well, when we set the business off, we always started with a strong ESG credentials. You know, we were CSI, I think it was at the time when we started, but ESG has come to the fore now.
Yeah.
And we always wanted to produce a product that was better than what was being supplied traditionally. And we knew with the offsite, we could always produce a better insulated, more airtight, less waste product. Then, obviously, Nigel Banks, who some people may know works with us, and Nigel came across from Chemo. He's really switched on to energy efficiency. You know, he had a net zero house 10 years ago. He put his own sort of heat source pump in, he put his own PV, he put his own battery storage. So Nigel is a true advocate of this journey, and he's been instrumental in making sure that we keep that on the product development. And as we learned the product, we knew we could get to net zero, which is the current phrase that's involved, by doing PV and heat source. But like all developers, that involved a lot of rehashing the home to make sure it fit.
Yeah.
What we've done is redesign the product now, so you can have a net zero house with a vanilla product. So we've created space in the M&E. So the M&E design is exactly the same with traditionally gas-fired boiler or T-source pump and PV. So we've designed out a lot of the challenges around net zero, so the product can still work traditional, but also we can adapt it.
Yeah.
We've also took the view that, you know, by 2030, every home that we produce should be a net zero house at no extra cost, and should cost the people buying the house no extra money to run it.
Yeah.
So working with supply chain, so we have an ambition now to produce every home net zero. We've created the design, we've created the product, but we're now working with supply chain around the affordability challenge, which is around supply chain, which is around, you know, sale and leaseback type products, which is around using other industries to educate us around how we can bring technologies to bear, so you can have net zero, but also at minimal cost.
Yeah. Well, I love the strap line as well. Yeah, I love the strap line.
That's the whole point of Ilke Zero. You know, that is the whole point of Ilke Zero. Is you know, it's you know, net cost, net emissions. You know, it's all about focus on what the customer needs, and some of it will evolve. Some of it we've got, but we can produce net zero now at a very competitive price to traditional.
Yeah, and I love the strap line: 0 carbon, 0 bills, 0 cost. I think if you achieve that in 2030, you've done a cracking job. But I'm sure there's many overseas modular markets that are doing that, so it can be done.
I mean, if you take an expensive roof tile now and replaced it with PV panels, and PV panels become more competitive all the time, but if you redesign your roof and, you know, you move away from the fact that you need a slate tile, and you move to the fact you can have, you know, you have glass on the roof, or even as the cost comes down of the integrated PV, then, you know, then you've got a house that becomes an energy creator rather than energy user. I mean, and that technology exists now, and it doesn't take much of a leap of faith to get there. The problem is, again, as all things in this country, anything that's new, there's always a pilot, and nobody wants to be the first adopter. And so it's about finding like-minded clients who are taking that journey with us. And, you know, we've done 4 sites now with net zero on. So we did the Innovation Village up at Gateshead. We did 4 for, what do they call them? London.
Places? No.
Oh. Greenwich. So we did 4 for Greenwich in London. We did a couple down in one of the Keepmort sites, and then we've also did the 2 pilot schemes which we did. So we've delivered net zero over a number of sites now. Yeah. So the technology is there. It's just about bringing the, you know, if you've got volume and scale again, the price comes down.
Of course, and it's about, like you say, you need people on that journey with you, don't you, that are willing to adopt that and be early trailblazers in net zero, and it's going to be more expensive to start off that journey for sure.
Yeah, but the industry now, I mean, if you see a lot of what Ocean Media are doing and CIH are doing, they're pushing net zero as a key agenda item. Every investor we speak to, ESG is top of their agenda. Yep. So I think the market's now, rather than us having to push in the market's now starting to pull. So there's definitely a journey that we're on.
Amazing. And it'd be remiss of me not to mention this, but one thing that I think you've done well throughout your entire career is collaboration. But clearly when you talk about the Gresham House deal, the Places for People deal, how important is collaboration within this modular marketplace at the moment, would you say?
It's hugely important. I mean, one, we don't know everything. Two, there's others out there who are foraging the same path as us. So, and I also think we're stronger together. Wherever anybody does, we're stronger together. So whether it be working with our clients, Place for People, very much early adopters. David Cowans has been very much on the technological eco front foot for a while. Yep. I know he's very passionate about being an innovator. So having that leadership at that organization's helped us greatly, but also they know their market better than we do. So learning from them around, if you think that we not just Place for People, we managed to hook up with Building Better, who represent 20 RPs, and we took our refreshed design around net zero around them clients, and they inputted around the position of the toilets, the style of kitchen, the fenestration of the windows.
Yeah.
And that really gives us a good product. And then when we talk about PRS, they've got a slightly different price market. They're looking at different floor finishes. They're looking at different accessibility. Maybe the ensuite and the bathroom is more important to them because they're going to have renters sharing rather than individual family groups. So collaborating with clients, collaborating with competitors, collaborating with supply chain is hugely key to everything. I'd quite happily plagiarize off anybody because, I'm not so proud to know that I think I know it all. And I think it's a valuable lesson. You do learn very early on when you're a cocky young 40-something that you think you know it all. You come crashing down very quickly.
And just quickly, because we focus quite heavily there on Ilke, just give us a bit of a flavour of MJ Evans, because obviously doing a big role there with them. What did you inherit there, and what's the journey there going on at the moment?
I mean, MJ Evans has been, it's been fantastic. I mean, you talk about where we started with Apollo. I mean, MJ Evans, John Evans owned the business. He sold out with private equity, obviously through my time at Keep Mode and others. I became used to work in the private equity environment. I was approached to become chair. So I'm non-exec chair of MJ Evans. They had a groundworker who services probably all the top 20 house builders in the UK. They're based out of the Midlands. The remit when I went in was, fresh streamer with a private equity backers of the business, wanted to develop the business. So a very fragmented market with lots of regional players. The vision was always to grow the regions, consolidate the base, and take it on a journey 3-5+ years and create another fantastic business.
Yep.
So part of my role has been sort of helping John make the transition from owner occupier to a corporate business, recruiting a new chief exec and putting a new management team in, developing a strategy and a business plan that reflects what people sold the business on, and I've been able to use the experience I had coming through the Apollo Keep Mode journey, but also some of my corporate background, my commercial background about helping. And it's a different role. You become more of a coach and mentor rather than a hands-on exec. So it's using your skills you've developed, but in a different way. And it's not always easy making that transition as well. So sometimes you just want to dive in and pick the problem up. That's not your job. Your job is to help others dive in and pick the problem up.
Yeah.
So the ambition is that we'll grow the business, but keep the great service delivery that the business had when it was acquired, and follow the Apollo Keep Mode model of keeping that culture, developing that culture, but being a great business that people want to work with.
Yeah, you've had some, incredible growth. I've seen you pop up in Manchester, and you've had some geographical growth. Is that the plan, to go into more areas of the country?
It was deliberate. I mean, it's a great business. Groundworks, are sometimes the hidden value in every development. If it's going to go wrong, it's going to go wrong in the ground.
Yeah.
So having a trusted groundwork partner was always part of, we saw a real opportunity to take somebody who was really good at what they did and try and replicate on a regional growth business. So it is about sort of organic growth in regions, and that's been delivered. So when we started off, we were a business that was based out of Walsall. We then opened an office in Banbury that went from, we shared some of the turnover from Walsall with Banbury to get it started. And that went from 10 million. This year it'll do 60 plus million. So it's a fantastic growth in 2.5 years. We're going to try and replicate the same model in Warrington. So we've recruited a key individual, put a commercial guy in, transferred 3 schemes across. So it's got an anchor to start its business from, the healthy bid pipeline now. We've recruited a manager to start the Yorkshire business. So we're going to try and replicate Warrington in Yorkshire about 12 months on.
Yeah.
And then we'll reach each of these hubs to come, but we'll keep the head office in the Midlands. We've moved office into Aldridge from Walsall, so it's now got a stronger foundation to build from. And we'll also look at an acquisition because, as I said, it's a very fragmented market with huge growth potentials, but huge synergy potentials as well across the piece.
Yeah, awesome. And as we look to the future and some of the key challenges that are coming up for me a lot at the moment are the land and how competitive land is at the market at the moment. Are you seeing that from an Ilke perspective?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think at the end of the sort of COVID restrictions for development, nobody expected the house sales to be as strong as what they were. If you think people hadn't bought land for about 12 months because they weren't sure of the economy, the recovery, so sales have been fantastic, outstripping anything I've ever seen. Land has been burnt through at a premium. So therefore, the land market's hotted up. You've also got Homes England going out and buying land and bringing more land to market. So it's a hot market at the moment. But these things go in cycles, James. I mean, you can see the grey hairs on my head and the receding hairline. I've been through 4 or 5 cycles of like this, and it will settle down. But at the moment, it's a really hot market just because the recovery in the housing market has been so much better than anticipated. It's quite interesting when you look at some of the studies that, some people are moving out of the city into the suburbs, and that's driven some of the land development.
Yeah.
But actually, when you look at the void occupancy rates in the city, they're not that great. So people are still moving. So it's a hot market across all pieces. The challenge will be that we make sure we don't forget the affordable market and the land market doesn't become so overheated that we've got another problem building in terms of affordability.
Yeah.
But hopefully people learn the lessons of 2008 and it doesn't overheat too much.
Well, I honestly felt that COVID would create another 2008, if I'm honest, at the time when it happened. But the market's been busier than I've ever seen. I suppose you're going to have the same answer for this, but materials is something that's coming up on a daily basis at the moment. Is that the same thing? The market's slightly overheating?
We're quite lucky in Ilke that because of the factory nature, we've pre-bought in bulk a lot of the product, so we're pretty much insulated in the short term against some of these vagaries. But timber at the moment is the hottest. I was talking to our supplier on timber. It's the hottest market he's seen in 25 years of him being in usual trading. Roof tiles, we had a bit of a glitch on roof tiles not so long back where we were shipping roof tiles around the country from site to site. Bricks, thankfully from the brick shortage in 2014-15, they seem to have got the kilns sorted, so that's been less of a problem. But yeah, supply chain, I think everybody's been caught out. I mean, everybody lost 6 months production and then it's come back at a supercharged delivery. We are seeing timber starting to settle down because the mills in America are starting to cut timber again now, which is positive.
Yeah.
And I do see it as a spike rather than an ongoing trend. I just hope the prices come down as quickly as they went up.
Probably not, as you probably know yourself. But
it's like petrol on the forecourt, isn't it? It's quick to go up, very slow to come down. So.
Yeah, 100%. And as we wrap up a little bit, the last couple of things was, if you were to change one thing at government, if you're advising government at the moment, what would you change in the market? What would help us speed up delivery or the growth of the housing sector? Because we're clearly miles behind the actual targets we set.
The one thing is planning, and I don't want to be like a planning basher because it's got a role to play, but I do think in this country we've complicated that something's very simple in other countries.
Yeah.
And I do think, we tinker at the edges rather than giving it a wholesale, well, what should work.
Yeah.
And when you see some of the things that we come across in planning, it does, it's like running a 110-meter hurdle race, and the hurdle gets higher every time you run the race. Yeah. So I do think there's a review of planning, but again, some fantastic planners out there, and I don't want to be seen as a critic. I just think the process is wrong rather than the planners, and the system is wrong rather than the planning.
Yeah, but I see that, but it's the same challenge that everyone comes up with. Every single time I speak to someone, they say planning needs a reform because, ultimately we're being driven to do that. But if you're a developer at the moment, putting millions of pounds out there, the planning process is meaning that your cash is in that land for a long, long time before you start making a return on it. So I think it is something that comes up quite regularly, for sure.
It is a challenge. I mean, there's no question. So I mean that's from a business point of view. Like, the other thing I'd like to see change is probably the apprentice profile, because, as you say, again, that's become a process that you have to learn how to work it rather than just being natural employee apprentices.
Yeah.
Because when I was at Keatmore, we had 10% tags, trainees, apprentices, and graduates. Once they brought the apprentice levy in and it became more complicated, we dropped down to below 5%. And that wasn't because the will wasn't there; it just became because it became that difficult to work with. So that's a personal thing I'd like to see change, is the way that young kids get entry into the market and make it more attractive.
100%. And it's one thing that we've all, as a market, got to work together on, because, I went and did a talk recently at a school and at college, and no one there. So, they're just not interested in the sector, and there's tech and other areas that are more popular now with kids. So we've got to do more to make it more appealing. And I think modular and the way it works and manufacturing could actually play a part in that, for sure, because it's more interesting for people.
Absolutely. I do think you make a point there in education, that for too long we've been focused on educational outputs rather than creating young people ready for work.
Yeah.
It's a balance, isn't it? And we don't want to go at the bad old days of wrapping people across the knuckles when they don't learn. We want to encourage people to be the best they can be. So I do think there's this young people development generation, particularly with Brexit, gives us a real opportunity to create real employment opportunities for the youth of today. It's fantastic.
100%. And final question, prediction for the next few years of the housing market. How do you see it playing out?
I think next 2 or 3 years will still remain remarkably healthy. I think demand's still there. I think balance sheets are in a totally different position to 2008. So I do think there's a bit more responsibility about the top developers. I think they've got a more measured approach. They're not just taking jam today. I think they are thinking about tomorrow. I think that with the change in regs, I think you'll see a better housing product come off as well. Super insulated, more fuel efficient. I do think we're approaching that point in the cycle where refurbishment's going to have to kick off again. And if you think decency and everything that occurred during the housing market when we first came across each other, that cycle seems to have been dormant for about 10 years. So I do think there's going to have to be some investment in existing stock, particularly if we're going to meet some of the carbon targets that people talk about.
Yeah.
And I do think people will be working from home a lot more. So I think that work-life balance in the product that we create needs to reflect how society is evolving. So workspace, living space, but more leisure space as well. So I think we need to keep one eye on how societal trends are moving as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much for your time, Dave. If people do want to reach out and ask anything in terms of questions, are you happy for them to send you a message on LinkedIn if people want to?
Absolutely. Like I say, I'm pretty open. I'm probably not the quickest at getting back to people, but generally I do eventually. So yeah, I'm more than happy to engage with people. So,
well, thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, no worries, James. Thank you.
Catch up with you soon. Take care.